Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Show. My name is Andrew Claudio, aka GMAC, and it is time for another preview of another Knicks matchup, this time against the Toronto Raptors north of the border, a homecoming for OG Anunoby as he goes to play against his old team, as well as a check-in with an old friend, good old Barrett, who's having an outstanding season in his first full year north of the border and what is actually his home up in Canada. It's appointment television, it's appointment watching, and it's a date we circle on the calendar when the Knicks play the Raptors, especially after last year's trade, which is almost a year to the day on the calendar. What a time flies when you're making blockbuster trades. I will say at the outset, because I already see the comments, Yankee fans, this is a safe space. I promise we are here to talk about basketball and only basketball. And joining me to talk about basketball, I mean, so many hats he wears now, but my good friend, Mr. S. Baraheni from the Athletic the Athletic NBA show.
Yeah.
By the way, your mic's working now.
I knew it.
I don't know how.
I fixed something while you were prepping here. So
yeah, while the reason we were late is because we couldn't get his mic to connect, and here we are. You're in HD and beautiful audio sound, Dolby audio sound. S. Baraheni.
Let's go Mets. What's going on, y'all? Hello.
He said it, not me. I promise this is a safe space, Yankee fans.
No.
Try.
Let me just say one thing. Because obviously Toronto Blue Jays here. A loss for the New York Yankees is a win for the Toronto Blue Jays. That's how I see it. That's my world. I'm sorry, Yankees fans. Just the way the cookie crumbles. There we go. That's how I'd like to start this podcast off.
I have no comment other than I co-signed said comment. Nice. And especially since a loss in this for the Yankees was an actual win for my baseball team.
True. Yes.
But nonetheless, we're here to talk about the Knicks and the Raptors. We're also here to talk about you, my friend. You've been very busy this season on the Athletic NBA show on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Is that the correct days?
Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays.
Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. You can check out the
listen every day, really.
So. That's what Dave do for, right?
Yeah. Yes. Dave, Zena Kata. We got Andrew Schlecht on there as well, and Alex Spears on the Saturday Slam and Jam. They're all great people. Yes.
Andrew and I are feuding these days because
really?
He told me last year that I didn't have to worry about Isaiah Hartenstein going to the Oklahoma City Thunder because the Thunder weren't going to look toward the free agency market because they never get a big free agent. Why would he choose Oklahoma City and its 17 people over Broadway?
He said the small market, right? He's like, why would he go? Yeah.
You know what happened? He chose Oklahoma City and that bag over Broadway. It's amazing how often free agents eventually choose money over anything else. But enough about the baseball offseason. S, thank you so much for joining me. It's good to see you, my man. Yep. And I'm actually very excited to talk about this Raptors team.
Cool.
Because obviously we are connected at the hip forever. And that's not a reference to OG Anunoby and his hip issues over the years. The fact that it seems as of now, like a win-win trade. I don't know a Knicks fan that isn't happy with OG Anunoby. I know there are still those in the RJ Barrett hive that miss him, see some of his progress this year, and maybe a little frustrated. But at the end of the day, the Knicks are better. So how much can you fully complain?
Totally.
So I'm curious from the Raptors' perspective. Like obviously, Quickly hasn't played a bunch this year because he's been dealing with injuries, and RJ takes this leap, but there are some that may still question the efficiency. You tell me from the state of the Raptors standpoint, that they're better since Scotty came back, since Scotty Barnes returned to the lineup. How much better would you say to the Knicks fan that hasn't had the chance to watch other than like box score scouting some of RJ?
Dude, well, first of all, as a staunch OG Anunoby believer, I miss the dude. I obviously I watch Knicks basketball a lot, and so I enjoy watching him just be like one of the best defenders in the world, and the offensive leap he's taken. So like for me, the win-win of this trade is a little bit harder to dissect because OG was genuinely one of my favorite players to watch for these Raptors. So I imagine on the other side, it's like whatever RJ Barrett truther is there for the Knicks feels the same way I do, where I can't fully commit to saying this was a win, but you're right. It's tough to say that this is 100% a win-win right now, just because of the fact that we haven't seen that much of Quickly yet. Very much so. I believe in the sense of like the Raptors fandom and community. It's a bit of a prove it year after the contract. So it's like, all right, you've gotten paid now. Let's see what you can do and let's see what you're capable of doing. I think he was getting paid for what progress he will eventually make, not for what he's done. And so, yeah, I think it's a question still. That being said, I remember we talked about the trade and like how RJ was going to be. And, it was he just kind of the salary to be able to move,
Salary filler, RJ
right,
Barrett. Yeah.
right. And so from that perspective, it's been a massive win. And RJ has now turned himself into like one of the most efficient pick and roll playmakers in the league. Has made leaps and bounds as a playmaker and passer this season, although turnovers have been an issue. And just how poised he is. I know, from his Knicks days, the efficiency was still an issue, but for what it's worth, he's still more efficient than he was in his Knicks days right now, even despite some of the free throw woes and whatnot. So I think like from RJ's perspective, this was a massive win for his own career,
Yeah.
but trade wise, I don't know if we can say win-win right now. Yeah.
Well, I more mean it's like on track for a win-win.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Is what I'd
Sure.
say.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
the quickly part has to come to fruition.
For sure. Yeah.
Extending him for the number that they did, I think, caught a lot of our attention.
Yeah.
I was someone that wanted the Knicks to extend him at 5/125, and he ended up getting 5 for a lot more than that. So, God bless you, Emmanuel. I'm glad you got your bag. So locking in quickly for what they did, I thought. I mean that was a given the moment they traded for him.
Totally.
And like you said, turning RJ. I don't like to talk about players as assets, but just turning his value into what seems to be a positive now is already on the right track for what. And you know what? I was going to save this for later in the rundown, but we might as well just have the RJ conversation. So
sure. Yeah.
Look, he's at a 51 effective field goal percentage, which outside of last season, which he had a 47 with the Knicks and a 60 in Toronto. Yeah. I didn't think that 55 or that 60 was real, but getting over 50 is a bit of a hurdle for him. And he's been at that. And to your point about the playmaking, never averaged more than 3.3 assists a game in a Knicks uniform. And with the Raptors this season, he's almost at 5.9 assists per game.
Yep.
In the limited time that I've had a chance to check out the Raptors this year, some of the highlight packages, some of the league pass check-ins, the thing that continues to jump off the screen, I should say, with RJ is the playmaking, is the passing,
totally,
the ways he's finding Pirtle in the pick and roll, and
absolutely,
getting to like him getting downhill and finding the center in the dunker spot is actually. It's kind of surreal after years of like him and Mitchell Robinson having some chemistry, but the Knicks always wanting RJ to kick out in that sense. So I'll be honest, this might just be RJ improving, like getting better, because there was a stretch where he just wasn't kicking. He wasn't passing. He was just, oh no, I'm at the rim. I'm going to shoot it. Right. And that would lead to his efficiency issues. To the Knicks fan that is curious what RJ is going to look like tonight, what has contributed? Like, what's the biggest change? Is it like just simply seeing the court better, or are they coaching this into him? Like, what are you seeing?
So last season he was used more on the second side as a secondary creator next to Scotty Barnes, and so Scotty would go start the action. If nothing was there, they would kind of swing it to RJ, empty side pick and roll with him and Jakob Poeltl, and like RJ is kind of curling to the basket. And as you know, that's like the best version of RJ, where he's got momentum already before he catches the ball downhill. Yeah. And so that enabled him to play a little bit better last season. This year, with the injuries, they've just sort of force-fed him possessions, right? Like Scotty was out for, I believe, 11 games. And so in those 11 games, he was the number one option, and Quickly wasn't there either. So like they were really looking to him to be the main creator. And that was sort of a particle accelerator, if you will, of like a crash course of like, hey, this is what it takes to be the point guard and lead ball handler for an NBA team. And I think, to your point, he just has learned better reads. Like he's figuring out the situation with Jakob Poeltl. I liken Jakob Poeltl to Isaiah Hartenstein in the sense that they're both such giving screeners and sealers. And so the combination of RJ being able to get downhill plus Pirtle's screening ability has just opened up a window for him. And so I think that's the kind of truthful answer is like the system is helping and it's to his benefit. But at the same time, like I think he's just better when it comes to reading some plays and decision making wise. For what it's worth, if you ask him, he will say nothing has changed. Like every single time we've asked him, like, hey, man, like, what's the difference between what was happening in New York for like 200 games and this 60 game sample? He's like, nothing, man. Like, I'm glad to be home. Like, that's the only answer he'll give. And it's funny because the home and away splits this season have been vastly different, like wildly different. So he's like, I think he's averaging nearly 30 points per game at home, shooting like 50, 40, and 80. And then away, it's like 19 points per game, shooting 33, 30, and 20. It's ridiculous how different it is. Yeah.
Let me read these for you. So, like you said, averaging 27.7. So 28, 7, and 5 at home. And obviously 63% true shooting for RJ Barrett.
Yeah.
Like you said, on 52, 39, 82. So you're like 50, 40, 80.
Yeah.
On the road, 19, 6, and 7. So still good counting stats. A 47 true shooting.
Crazy.
On 40, 30, 59 shooting splits. So the home, talk about home cooking.
It's bizarre. Yeah, I know. Yeah. I mean, he's mentioned, he's like, I just feel more comfortable at home. And like, I think he's figuring out how the game has to travel and like the process that he has to take to be able to get that kind of game on the road. And he's also like told us like, hey, be patient. Like, I'm good. Like, I'll figure it out on the road. I got this. But it's an interesting dynamic because I think that's that next step. Like he's figured out how he can be effective. Now it's about doing it consistently every single game. So
let's stay there with the home and away splits. And like, I don't want to fully psychoanalyze a person I don't know. And like, I'm sure you can give me better insight into like him being home and how that might affect things. I would read into the nothing's changed comment, and I would just
push back on that.
I would just like, so it's not even so much that you've changed, but the situation's changed. Like, you've gotten better and you're not playing next to Julius Randle, and there's probably significantly more spacing, better spacing. The team doesn't require you to be as much of an off-ball threat as you used to have to be in New York. And that's not even like it's going to sound like it's not even like a knock at Julius Randle. It's going to sound like one, but the role that both of them play, they were probably destined to play the same role, and be the guy that's initiating the offense or be the second option. And, lo and behold, they're in different roles now. And one is now struggling in Minnesota, and the other seems to be thriving in Toronto. With what he went through, especially at the end of last season with the tragedy in his life, and now being in a situation, and I don't mean this as a slight, but where expectations are also a little bit different. You think he's just, from what you read, being around him and seeing him, he's just he's much more relaxed. He's much more freer. Like we talked about the turnovers before. Like, turnovers are allowed to happen, and you don't have a balding man that lives at Tarrytown, upstate New York, yelling at you for them. Like, it's all of that part of the, aside from like the on-court X's and O's stuff, is all of that contributing to this uptick this year?
I think so. Yeah. Michael Grange of Sportsnet just literally dropped a piece today, kind of featuring RJ's last season, through the loss that he dealt with in his family, the Team Canada stuff this summer, and how that's helped. Like, it definitely is part of it. Being home, being part of it. Darko Rajakovic said that like he feels more emotion when he's at home than when he's on the road. Like he mentioned that. He's like, yeah, for some reason he's more into it when he's at home because he understands that there's like this massive burden on him. I don't even know if a burden is the right word, but he just feels more proud and responsible when he's at home than maybe on the road. I don't know what that exactly is, but to your point, maybe it is some of that outside stuff that is impacting the game on the court. I think one other aspect is he is one of like the leaders of this team now because the team is super young, right? I was in the locker room the other day, and like it's guys like Jacoby Walter and Jonathan Mobo and all those guys are like chopping it up, and then RJ is in there with them, kind of chopping it up and hanging out with them too. And so I think it is part of like he now feels this responsibility to be a vet when he was a vet in New York, or when he was a young guy in New York. So maybe that's it. Maybe he just feels like he's more comfortable in his own skin because he's now one of the older guys on the team,
Ironically, he's at the exact same point he was at the exact same point now in his career that Julius was when he got to New York, the same time that RJ got drafted. So
right.
I'll never know about their relationship. They seemed very close off the court, and they would make jokes to each other. And the basketball fit to all of us just seemed like, oh, this is a bit clunky, especially if you're going to run somebody in the dunker spot that at all times. But yeah, I have an investment in obviously what RJ, an emotional investment, what RJ and Quickly do going forward, and
as do I with OG, man. I'm telling you, like, it is.
So let's pivot to that. Your thoughts. Or any questions you have about what you've seen from OG Anunoby this season.
Man, well, first of all, like it's awesome to see him blossom offensively. That was always kind of dormant in Toronto. Not even dormant, but there were flashes, moments. There were games where he was like this offensive weapon. Obviously, this is a different context in New York, and he's still thriving at the off-ball stuff, the shooting, the floor stretching, all that type of stuff. The secondary creation is what's super intriguing, and like the mid-range pull-up looks better than it ever has, and he's kind of finishing in and around the basket. The handle feels more controlled than it was a couple of years ago. So like all of that stuff is awesome to see, and he's still, again, one of the best defenders in the world. So I think, for the most part, you guys have gotten your money's worth early on into this contract with OG.
Knocking on all the wood around me.
Yes, knocking on all the I know, I hear you. And look, yes, injuries will always be the concern to see what happens and how, it's a long season. We'll see what happens with that. But for what it's worth, I have loved OG Anunoby's fit in New York. And it just is seamless with everything they want to do on both sides of the floor. So I guess my question with you is like, if there were a situation where the Knicks could only get one All-Star, okay, would you be okay with it being OG Anunoby? Or because I think name-wise, Carl, Anthony Towns, Cat, Big Bodega, whatever, and Jalen Brunson will get the nod. You know what I mean? But if in terms of like two-way consistency, and maybe this is just my Raptors head talking to me here, I think OG is like the all-star of this team. Am I wrong in suggesting that?
So I would like him to make the all-star team too.
Okay.
I think there's a world if the Knicks go on some type of winning streak and
they get multiple. Right.
So the tough part is that I'm pretty sure where Boston and Cleveland are, if you're making a case for a team to get 3 all-stars, it's those two teams.
For
like
sure.
You pull Mobley, Garland, and Mitchell. And then, pick a third Celtic. Maybe this is the year Derek White actually does make it. So with the Knicks, if you're looking at that, like that 12th spot, that roster spot, or as an injury replacement, and you wanted to go to OG, you could. He may be the best role player on the team and one of the best in the NBA. And if you want to reward him with an all-star berth, you can. Karl Anthony Towns is shooting like 50, 90 right now. I can't.
It's ridiculous.
And realize what I just said. I didn't say Jalen Brunson's the all-star. I said Karl Anthony Towns, who's been a revelation and an MVP candidate through the first 25 games of the season. Like that's how
he's been incredible. There's no question.
Yeah. So that's where it's tough. If OG was doing the impact we saw last year in January after the trade, where they like lost 3 games during the regular season when OG Anunoby played. Now, granted, he went out with that elbow injury.
Yeah.
And to your point about just weird injuries, it was like a bone spur that he was like, oh, my elbow's sore. And then he just was like, oh, let's get this cleaned out before the playoffs.
Yeah.
And it's just like, all right, I guess we're shorthanded for the next 3 months. Thanks. Or I guess more 2 months, but still.
Yeah.
Which is why we're knocking on wood about he hasn't missed a game yet this year. Point being, he's been outstanding his impact. They've lost back-to-back games with him in the lineup once since he's been here, and like one of the games was this weird loss in Atlanta where they were up 6 with 3 minutes left and just didn't score the rest of the game. He's been everything you could want in an off-ball threat. And I think because of what they saw in the playoffs with him at the 4, I think that allowed them to pull the trigger on trading Julius. Like, obviously not having a center after Hartenstein left and Mitchell Robinson got hurt helped. But that, I think, was the final, like, oh, we actually can survive with him, just like multiple wings switching between Bridges and Josh Hart and OG playing the 2 through 4, and we'll be okay there. And that's given them a new look and a new identity this season that we're all getting used to. The Raptors' identity this year, outside of RJ Barrett, that I'm very curious of, because like success is measured in different ways.
Sure.
And before the season, obviously, I was projecting Emmanuel quickly to play so much more than he has so far this year.
Yeah.
But
speaking of elbows,
weird elbow injuries. So I'm looking to eventually see where this team can get to. The Raptors, I think they're much better than their record says they are.
Yeah.
And they've been trending in the right direction since Scottie came back. And I think that will only continue to trend that way when Quickly comes back. Understanding what this draft is supposed to be. I'm very curious how you and maybe Raptors fans would measure success this year. Is it just like the team improves, hits their over-under win total? Is the play-in a conversation? If RJ makes an all-star team, is like the rest a wash? Like, how do you measure success this season?
Yeah, man. I think the fan base is split, to be honest with you, on this whole conversation, because there's some people who are like, what are you doing? Lose as many games as you possibly can, secure a chance to get, 25% lottery odds to draft a Cooper Flag or Ace Bailey or Amari Cooper, Dylan. I was going to say
Dylan Harper. Amari Cooper.
Dylan Harper. And so like, maybe that's the case. That's how they're leaning. I personally think that it's a win-win either way. If Scottie Barnes and RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly are developing and this team exceeds the expectations, that means that their players are good enough to compete. And that means like Scottie, especially, who, like you said, they've been playing 500 basketball since he came back, right? And so like his impact on the team as this all-star level player who's trying to become an all-NBA player is massive. And like, I think ultimately, if he's good enough to lead this team ahead of schedule and make them ahead of schedule, then you take that as a win, and whatever happens in the lottery happens in the lottery. Because I don't think this team would be able to make the top 8 in the East. I think like the Atlantas of the world are better. I think Miami is better. So like the 7-8 matchup, I think they'd be outmatched in that situation. That being said, maybe a playing game would be good for this team, because you get to see the experience of, okay, how does Emmanuel Quickly look like in a postseason setting? I know we've seen that, with the Knicks a little bit, but let's see.
But he struggled in those settings too, so it might actually be good for him to see him in a game, get an immediate game 7.
Totally. RJ played well in the postseason with the Knicks, right? But it's like, hey, let's see that now in a different setting, in a different role. Same with Scottie. Hasn't had too much postseason experience. He's had that one playoff series against Philly and then a play-in game, but not too much, right? So there is value to getting these guys some reps in the postseason and seeing how they look in those type of settings. That being said, I think they are obviously going to prioritize like kind of making sure that they can get into the lottery this year. That also depends on the schedule, because their next 2 months, crazy, absolutely wild schedule. You look at it, it's like maybe the hardest schedule in the league over the next 2 months, playing like contenders, playing really, really good playoff teams and whatnot. And so you might be forced into a situation where you are bad while your team is trending in the right direction. And maybe that's a win-win for where they want to go,
Yeah, they have 1 more with OKC, and then they have 5 more with Boston and Cleveland the rest of the way. So to your point, their strength of schedule is around the middle. It's actually very close to where the Knicks are in the middle of the pack. But so here's the problem: is the Washington of it all just weighs your strength of schedule so significantly down. Like they have 4 more games remaining with the Wizards, and unless you're the Nuggets for a night, you probably are going to beat the Wizards.
Yeah. Funny enough, all of those games, I believe, are after the All-Star break. So they have like a cakewalk of a schedule after the All-Star break, but until February, it's just a gauntlet. And so maybe you're in a situation where, I don't know, they're 7-17 right now. Maybe they're like 10-30 or like 13 and whatever by the All-Star break, and you're already in a position to be a top 4, top 5 team in the lottery, and you're still trending towards the right direction.
Well, to your point, they're right now 4th in lottery odds. So, and this is the third pod that I've been saying this, and it's in a row, because like talking about the Hornets, talking about the Pistons, and now the Raptors.
Yeah.
You could play into the play-in race and still be in the lottery. Like that's how bad the Eastern Conference is this year.
Yeah.
You could probably win 33 games and get like 7th best lottery odds and still make the play-in as the 10th seed because of how bad this conference is.
Totally.
I guess that just comes to a philosophical perspective or just an opinion from the franchise's standpoint of how much does the play-in matter? Like how much does being the 10th seed matter to you? And
well, Masai Ujiri said play-in for what? And everybody loves using that as like they're not going to go for the play-in.
Okay. That tells me all I need to know.
Yeah. So maybe that's the case. Maybe they don't want to be interested in competing in playoff experience and whatnot. But I do think like if this team somehow gets into the play-in, competes in that play-in game, it's because their best players have performed well. And like, you have to take that as a W any chance you get. Because if your players like Scotty and RJ and IQ are performing that way, then like you've done something right here, That's part of the process. It's like when OKC made the play-in a few years ago, and it's like, oh, hey, like SGA is actually much better than people expected. And then he turns into an MVP candidate. So, yeah.
So there's 2 examples that I go to with how valuable is the play-in, because it's one direction and it's the other. It's that one, and I guess you could also say the Pelicans when they won their 2 play-in games and then gave the Suns a run for their money. It was a 37-win team, and it was like, oh, there's something here. Wait till Zion comes back, and unfortunately, we see where they are now. Injuries. But that like shows a value for the play-in, and then you go to the inverse of Charlotte making it as the 10th seed in back-to-back years, losing in blowout fashion both years, and be like, all right, we're the 12th.
We're not that good,
right?
Yeah.
Like that's all we are is mid, and that's all the plan ends up being is mid. Like the Bulls for years not making any trades, and then like all right, we're the 9th seed is just the Chicago Bulls Invitational at this point, so I can't wait.
They're gonna do it again this year.
Watch it unprovoked. Like they didn't even plan to do it this year. Now this actually gets to a transactional question, because I don't know, after the busy trade season, I should say, they had last year during the year, I don't know like what their plan is potentially for who's available and who isn't. Who do you think's a keeper this season on the other side of the deadline?
Yeah, I think the only 2 names that pop up or will pop up are Bruce Brown and Chris Boucher, both guys on expiring deals, both guys who might be able to help a team that's trying to get into the playoff or like boost a contender's kind of rotation. That being said, like Bruce gets paid $23 million this year, and so adding that salary is tough. Chris Boucher, I think, is $13 million, and maybe that's a little bit more manageable to trade. That's why they've been playing him. I think he was out of the rotation last year. He's been playing much, much more minutes this year. And I think that's probably because they're trying to showcase him to see what he can do. So those are the 2 guys. I don't know what kind of compensation they'll get back for them, but I do think both guys will get moved at the deadline because they have guys behind them that need playing time, like Jacoby Walter, rookie, in Bruce Brown's position. And, Brown hasn't played yet this season, but ultimately I think that's a guy that will need some more minutes in the second half of the season. Same thing with Jonathan Mobo, big man, really, really good second round pick for them this year. So they have opportunities for some of their younger players, and I bet they're going to want to give them those minutes in the second half after the deadline.
We'll see what happens with the Raptors on the other side of the deadline. I'm obviously more intrigued about what we see from them tonight on the court in Toronto. As you mentioned, a very good home team when it comes to RJ Barrett. Going on the road, especially when you have this play-in tournament, this in-season tournament awaiting you for the Knicks, this rematch with Trae Young on
Wednesday. Are they going to rest anybody? Are they going to?
So Karl Anthony Towns missed the game on Saturday against Detroit with a knee injury. It seemed like just general knee soreness that he deals with.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if rest is the conversation around him or the rest is the way to classify it, but
Right.
I am curious if he plays tonight. That's for sure. I know he's going to
Okay.
he's listed as questionable. We'll see what happens. Campaign has an elbow.
Okay.
The elbow injuries are the thing to talk about today, apparently. So we'll see who plays. I can tell you one thing: if they're out, not many other Knicks will be in because that's Tibbs. The next man up of mantra is just as much as he preaches it doesn't actually
doesn't exist.
Exist. It's like, oh no, the next man up is who's still playing is going to keep playing for him.
Yeah,
Jalen Brunson was questionable on Saturday and played 44 minutes. Mikal Bridges did a 23-point win over the Hornets, played 47 minutes the other day. So, that's what they do. That's their culture, and it's worked so far. Let's hope it keeps working.
Yeah.
I have some on-court questions just
Sure.
for Knicks fans that might, again, haven't watched the Raptors much. What type of coverage are they going to be seeing tonight? Let's pretend that Cat's playing. Let's operate as if Karl-Anthony Towns is playing. Are they going to switch everything? Who do you think guards Karl-Anthony Towns? I'm assuming it's Pirtle, and like maybe they'll play some drop. But you tell me, like, who's guarding Brunson? How do you think they'll guard this high-powered Knicks offense?
Yeah, I actually think Scotty's going to guard Cat. I think that's
interesting. Okay.
I think, especially with the pick and pop stuff and him kind of spacing the floor, I think they would rather keep Pirtle closer into the paint, just as sort of help. Now, that being said, like, where do you park Pirtle, And so
Josh Hart.
Yeah, probably Josh Hart. Yeah, that's probably the situation you go with.
Yeah.
And so we'll see if that's the case, but I think they'll go Scotty on Cat just because I think they like Scotty's length on that side. He's always plays so much better defense against bigger guys. Maybe that'll help them switch more on the perimeter too. And I think, I've obviously read a lot of the stuff that Knicks fans have talked about when it comes to the switch versus, if a team is playing conventional defense, very different offenses here. So maybe that's the case that they implore more switch coverage and kind of like dealing with living with the consequences of, let's say, Cat being on a smaller guy or whatnot and seeing how that goes. But yeah, I think they'll start out with Scotty on Cat and go from there. Offensively, when it comes to the Raptors, I think you'll see a lot of like delay high post actions where Pirtle is above the break or Scotty is above the break, and they're kind of running back cuts and splits all over the place to kind of get an opening for their cutters. So that's the Raptors' offensive bread and butter. But defensively, I think we could see Scotty on Cat. That'd be interesting.
That's
at least I hope so. Yeah.
It's a good test for the Knicks. From the Knicks perspective, like I actually want to see as many switching defenses as we possibly can.
Yeah.
This season, this is a thing that it's going to happen come playoff time, especially if they have any visions of playing Boston and being competitive against Boston. You're going to have to deal with Drew Holiday guarding Cat, and then them putting Horford or Porzingis on Josh Hart or just as a roamer. Maybe going a little zone, which is funny because Missoula does that thing where he has when they go zone, what's it called? Holiday plays the center, so he plays the middle. So he's the one guarding the paint, which is pretty insane. Regardless, I'm intrigued by this matchup, and coming off the Toronto off the Detroit game that they just played, where Cade Cunningham went off. Not saying RJ will be what Cade Cunningham was, but there was also a lot of mismatch hunting, and not even like specifically who's Jalen Brunson guarding. Let me bring him into the action, and then let Cade go to work. Do we see RJ with the ball, then bring Brunson's man into the action and have Brunson guarding RJ, and how otherworldly that could potentially be?
How has the Knicks transition defense been this year?
Not great.
Not great. Okay. So I think that's something to keep an eye out, because RJ has been one of the best transition players in the league this year. And so, like, I think he's second in the league in fast break points behind Giannis. And that is something that could be very, very good for the Raptors tonight. So if they can switch, force turnovers, get out and running. I'm just talking from the Raptors perspective.
Yeah, no, I get it.
You know what I mean?
Believe me, I get it. And I think I'm making sure that I'm not like talking out of my ass the not good. Their defense across the board has needed work. So I'm also assuming that their transition defense hasn't been good. There's been a lot of, especially the last game, a lot of open threes. against Detroit.
Knicks are 13th in transition defense.
And transition defense, which
Yeah.
honestly, I think that number's improved over the last month or so.
Not bad. Yeah.
Their defense as a whole has improved over the last month. They were around 27th, 28th. They got up to around 18th, I think, in the league. So hearing that they're 13th in transition is actually a positive. So
I honestly think a lot of that is like Cat being better than he was the first 2 weeks.
There's another element to it, and it's Mikal Bridges being
better.
The first 3 weeks.
He's definitely the elephant in the room when it comes to the defensive conversation for the Knicks. I'm glad he is playing better though on the defensive end. Know what he can do on the offensive end. Obviously, people are going to talk about the 3-point shot and above the break 3-point shooting and all that stuff, but the defense was the part with Mikal that you want to see because like when those two plus OG are engaged, like that was the vision for New York, right?
Yeah, I was talking to my buddy Bryce Simon, who covers the Pistons for the Pistons Pulse, and obviously is one half of the Game Theory podcast with Sam Vecini. Reading his Substack, where his Substack is his notes for the game he just watched. He just posted them up there. And just all his notes about Mikal are like, what is this? Like, what did New York trade for? And I said, like, hey, I read your Substack. You asked the exact same questions we've been asking all season. I'm hoping that just as more time and as he gets more comfortable, he gets better. You know, we'll see what happens. I never did get your thoughts on what the Knicks did this offseason before we get to some questions from people watching live. You know, they made 2 more blockbuster trades that shook up the NBA. Obviously, the Mikal Bridges trade for a lot of picks, and then the Karl-Anthony Towns trade right before training camp. You know, what were your thoughts when those trades happened, and you know how close to a contender does it make them?
I mean, I love the Cat trade. I still do. I mean, I think I've grown to appreciate the Minnesota side, although they're dealing with their own kind of identity crisis right now. I loved it from the Knicks' perspective from the minute it happened. I just think Cat is a guy who's like going to elevate your ceiling to another level compared to Julius Randle. And I think, you know, we're seeing it right now with Minnesota and Dante DiVincenzo. He has not looked the same. Like he has not been the shooter.
Yeah.
And I remember listening to you on Game Theory talking about like, hey, maybe this is a fluke. Like maybe that's right. And for what it's worth, it seems like that's the case. Like that seems like he just is not shooting the way that he was in New York.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, I absolutely love it for the Knicks. I think Cat, to your point, has been an all-star, one of the best offensive players in the league this season. And like, I just think he elevates their ceiling. Like him and Brunson in the playoffs, going to be a nightmare to deal with, even despite the switch heavy stuff being an issue. That's something you work out and address in the regular season. On the Mikal front, obviously it hasn't gone the way that people expected it to. But if you look at it from like a, you know, improving their odds of becoming a championship contender, I think I agree with what Josh Hart said, which is like, none of this will matter.
Yeah.
It could be 400 picks. If they win a championship, none of it will matter. Like it really does not matter if the Knicks end up winning their first title in 50 years. That will it wash all picks possible. It truly, like, I guess that's my opinion on it. That being said, are they closer to a championship contender? Yeah, I think so. I think compared to what they were last year, I think they absolutely are. Now, that being said, I would like for them to, but this is just my personal thing. I want to see how it looks with Mitchell Robinson once they come back. I want to see Precious a little bit more in an extended run and seeing how they look in a more switch-heavy scheme on the defensive end, because I think with Precious, you can do that. I imagine their defense starts to climb a little bit more now that they have Precious, and once Mitch comes back. Those are the questions that I have in my mind for how they can be contenders and what they look like. But yeah, overall, I think they are. I think they're trending in the right direction. And when you stack them up next to the Eastern Conference with Philly kind of going haywire and Milwaukee building their identity, but I think that would be a great series. And then, you know, when it comes to Boston, like, yeah, we'll see what happens.
You know, all-time great test over there.
And absolutely. Yeah.
Like there's levels to it, you know.
Yeah.
Like
I don't think opening night is a fair indicator also of what that's so far away.
I got to be honest, we were live on playback for the Orlando game that clinched their spot in the NBA Cup.
Yeah, where they demolished them. Yeah.
So there's a point in that third quarter where the Knicks were up by 38. and if they won by 37 or more, then the
Bah.
Celtics got in, and there was going to be the Knicks as the 1 and the Celtics as the 4.
Right. Yeah.
And we were going through the internal dilemma of like, do you want another game against Boston? Like, isn't 4 enough this season? Like, does this cup matter? And I actually talked myself into like, you know what, the game would be at the Garden, the real one, not the one in Boston, the Madison Square Garden. And maybe it is a good, like, let's get a second shot at this. Like, we saw them show up for this Orlando game. Like, oh, this is
big one.
Like, you seen the town?
Of course. Yeah.
This was the not fucking around crew. Like, this team showed up ready to play and made a statement against Orlando. And I really wish that team also showed up against Detroit.
Yeah.
But like, that seems like a statement win in that this is what happens when we're locked in on all in all facets. And so I wondered if it was worth seeing that again. To your point though, like the Boston test at the end of the day is the test for this year, and it's what matters. I also think you could, like, eventually that team's not gonna be all together. Like, they're in year 2 or 3 of the run, and you're in game 25 of the run. So there's a world where eventually it is the next time, and this young team is going to be together, especially since Jalen Brunson took an outstanding discount this offseason that allows them to stay together for a while. So, I'm confident that this is year 1 of a couple cracks at it.
I think so too. I think
we'll see what happens. And to your point about like what Josh Hart said, Yankee fans, cover your ears. Like, no one's going to care about
15 years,
15-year contract.
Nobody will care.
You put a banner up that flies forever. I'm never gonna, like, when I have kids one day and I see that banner at Citi Field or at the Garden, I'm never gonna be like, you know how many picks they get up from Mikal Bridges? And it's like, no, that's the Knicks won a championship. Our team won a championship, and that banner is all that matters. At the end of the day. So
absolutely, couldn't agree more.
That's the goal. All right, so people watching live, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in for this edition of the Knicks Film School pregame pod. Let's get to some questions. Let's start with Mr. Kevin Danishevsky. Hey, S, what's the deal with the IQ injury? Are you worried that if he comes back and plays well, y'all will be too good to tank? So kind of a 2-part question.
The IQ injury is rare. It's basically Tommy John surgery. Like, he didn't get Tommy John surgery, but it is the UCL. He tore his UCL in his left elbow. So it is a rare NBA jersey. You don't necessarily injury. You don't necessarily see this often. I don't think they're going to go the surgery route. It doesn't seem like they're going to go the surgery route. If they were going to, it would have already happened. They're just hoping it heals naturally. He has not been cleared for contact yet, so I think they're going to take their time with it. And I think that relates to your second question, where it's like they are not rushing any of these guys back. They're going to take their time to make them 100% healthy before they get on the court, because they understand the stakes of, kind of making sure they can get lottery position as much as possible for what it's worth.
Another question from Kevin. Also, what's OG's longest stretch of staying healthy? He's not missed a game this year, and it's been so nice. Encourage me that will continue.
Yeah, I can't remember, honestly. I wish I knew. I wish I had the answer here off the top of my head. I would imagine it was the season he made the all-defense team. That's probably the one that I could think of where he was the healthiest that he was in his career. But yeah, that's the one that pops out to me, I guess.
I'm going to his basketball reference page.
Cool.
While I look that up, let's go to just a comment from Jason Cole. It's so funny how nobody wanted Cat. Now all of a sudden he's the savior. So here's what I'll say, because I've gone through this. You heard that game theory episode, and I also expressed some of that here at Knicks Film School. That, like, I've never been the biggest Cat fan. I never had the closest look at his game. It's mostly been like when you're tuning in and they're on national TV.
Sure.
And obviously I had a front row seat to the growing pains and what eventually became of Julius Randle, 3-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA. And I got an analogy for you. Like, my parents had this really old couch that, like, I grew up with and my brother grew up with, and for years, like, it was eventually like an old couch that needed to be replaced, but it was like, but it's the couch. Like, it was this sectional that, like, you knew where all the comfortable spots were. You knew where not to sit, where to sit. You knew where to go to. And it was like, we're not getting rid of it because there's a sentimental value. Like, this couch has been through wars. Like, some important conversations have been had on this couch. And a little bit after my wedding, my wife and I, as an anniversary present, because my parents' anniversary is right after our
Oh,
wedding date.
nice. Okay.
So like as a gift, we got them new couches. You know what their favorite thing in the world to do is sit in their couches
Sit
and
in the
watch
couch.
anything at the end of the night, and just
Nice.
like it's got recliners, but like the movie theater ones that are
Nice.
automated.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, oh, we should have probably upgraded to this a long time ago. And this is indeed an upgrade. And oh my
Yeah.
God, life is different. That's been the experience going from Julius Randle to Karl Anthony Towns. You went through the wars and the devil you know of what Julius Randle is, and you're like, you know what? There's a known with Julius Randle, there's an unknown with Cat. Through 25 games, like, oh, these couches recline. I'm A-okay with the stretch five that gets 15 rebounds a game. You know?
I love the couch comparison. I'll give you one too from
Okay.
the Raptors' perspective. DeMar to Kawhi.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
like, and I'm not comparing Cat to Kawhi, obviously, and I'm not gonna predict that they go on this miracle run to win the championship, although that would be great. I think it's just DeMar obviously had his deficiencies, especially in the playoffs, and when you elevate and get a player who's like all-star caliber, all NBA caliber, just changes the trajectory of this team, man. And like that kind of comes to what it is.
If I can remind everybody of conversations you and I have had on this very show over the years, maybe Randall will be the DeMar.
The DeMar. Yeah.
Gets used to upgrade to now again. Cat is not what Kawhi was.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens in
playoff
time.
You remember the conversations around Kawhi when they traded for him? It's like, oh man, can he stay healthy? Is he still this guy? And like 40 games into the 2018-2019 season, we're like, oh my God, this guy, all NBA player right here.
Yep.
So,
yeah. And there was also like an understanding that he had a Cat, like, I will play X amount of regular season games.
Yeah.
I will be your best player in every playoff game.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. So thank you, Jason, for that. From Brian Valderrama, does the fan base still have faith in Masai Ujiri?
I think he has bought himself some time. It was kind of wavering there for sure. Especially during the Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet era, there were a couple of mishaps and not getting the value you wanted out of Pascal Siakam, and letting Fred VanVleet walk and all that stuff. But I think for what it's worth, the OG Anunoby trade, getting back RJ and quickly, the draft stuff that they did this summer, they drafted 4 rookies, and for what it's worth, like all 4 of them have shown flashes and moments. And so, yeah, I think he's bought himself some time here to figure out what they can do and build out a team. And like, he has so much cachet with the city and the organization that, yes, I would say for the most part, people have a lot of faith.
I'm always curious how long of a leash in tenure you get after your front office, your organization wins a championship.
Yeah.
I personally don't have the experience to know how long you get because the Knicks haven't won since 1973. But look, I'm coming from a market where like Tom Coughlin eventually got run out of town. There's, again, bringing up baseball, there's a general manager that's won 5 World Series that a lot of the fan base is done with. And I recognize, like, eventually,
eventually
a fresh perspective runs out. But in the NBA, just to bring it back to ball, like the time span usually is much shorter. The lifespan. Like Frank Vogel got fired 2 years after winning a title. So we'll see what happens. Last question isn't for you. It's for me. It's for my buddy Luke Sylvia from formerly of the 6-Man Show, but down in Orlando, gigantic Orlando Magic fan. I say on behalf of both of us, I think I hated to see the Franz injury come across my timeline. That was just very brutal to see. But shout out to you, Luke. He says, hey, GMAC, could y'all please not lose to the Hawks so that when my Magic lose to the Bucks tomorrow, we don't have to play y'all Sunday? So Luke is thinking long-term that if the Magic lose, which without Franz, it's highly likely they'll lose to the Bucks.
Yeah.
That their next game is against the Hawks and not against the Knicks.
Right.
So now you're just thinking about the schedule and wins and losses, which is a fair perspective to have. Luke, I will say I'll do my best. I will do my best to help the Knicks win against the Hawks on Wednesday. Can't promise anything because I will not play a minute. I I'm not in Tibbs' circle of trust. Never will be.
Trey in the Garden, man. I can't wait. That's going to be such a great game.
I can't wait either. And I hope it goes like the majority of his career has gone, outside of 5 games in the playoffs a couple years ago. And it's where he's normally lost to the New York Knicks at Madison Square Garden. Yes, that is I forget the numbers, but he's won like 3 times in the regular season against the Knicks. But there's a playoff series where Julius Randle shot 27%. That Trae Young gets credit for owning.
Actually, someone in the comments just said Achua legacy game. Trae Young hates playing Precious Achua.
Does he really?
Hates it. I have film. I have it on film. The man is one of the best Trae Young defenders there is in the world. Okay. I promise that. Hopefully we get to see it on Wednesday. That'd be fun.
I hope we get to see it too, in a backup role. I hope Cat's okay and he's playing that game. But I hear you that in the sense of like, oh, we actually have someone, a big man that can stay with Trae.
Yes.
And not necessarily, get blown by. So, we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Baraheni, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of the Knicks Film School pregame pod. Before you get out of here, you got a lot of stuff to promote. Please let the fine folks at home know where they can find you and all the work that you do.
Yeah, first of all, I got a chance to watch the Westchester Knicks. I'm the in-arena host for the Raptors 905, so I watched 2 games of the Westchester Knicks. They're fun. TJ Warren just out there getting buckets, what a game, which is a different story for a different day. Yes, go listen to the Athletic NBA Daily with myself, Dave Dufour, and Zena Keita. We have a great podcast going, recapping all of the NBA every morning. If you like Raptors stuff, if you want to keep in tune with RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly and whatnot, I write for Raptors Republic. I recap games for Raptors Republic. And yeah, that's the gist. That's all I got going on.
Well, I enjoy seeing you busy and seeing you working. It's been cool to see you get more of a platform this year as well. So, I'm glad we got your mic working too, because it was great to hear you in the best possible quality possible. Thank you so much for joining me as always. And thank you to everybody who tuned in for this edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. If you dug it, please head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video. Remember to subscribe. I will be back Tuesday night, not day of on Wednesday. Tuesday night, we're going to blow out the pregame pod and make it a little bit longer, a little bit more thorough with Hawks Fan TV to preview this matchup against the Hawks. Trae at the Garden against Precious Achua. That's the graphic. Trae, Precious, NBA Cup. It's on the house, Adam Silver. But we will preview this matchup in detail on Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Join us here on the Knicks Film School YouTube channel live if you want to send in your questions or just your trash talk at Alex from Hawks Fan TV. Until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I will speak with you soon. Peace. And let's go.